Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we're excited to have Stephen Gyllenhaal with us to share his journey on how servant leadership is seen in the film industry. Stephen is an acclaimed film director and poet with a career that spanned over 4 decades. He's known for directing powerful films like Waterland and Losing Isaiah, and for his work on iconic TV series such as Twin Peaks and Homicide, Life on the Street. Stephen has truly left his mark on Hollywood and the world of film and television. Stephen's storytelling is all about deep empathy and nuanced characters, setting new standards of excellence in the industry. Under his leadership, many young actors and crew members have thrived, showing his commitment to mentoring and developing talent. His recent projects continue to tackle important social issues, reflecting his dedication to making a positive impact through his art. Notably, he directed the film Uncharitable, which explores critical themes in the nonprofit sector and challenges conventional thinking. Today, Stephen will share his thoughts how servant leadership can drive success and create a supportive, creative environment.
Stephen, thank you so much for being here. This is really exciting to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Your background is unbelievable. Share with our audience a little bit about your background.
You know, this is a whole other side of this, but I have my own charity or my own not-for-profit, which is a mental health. I don't like that word, mental health, actually, but a mental health institute called the Identity Development Institute, and it's all about really at its core the earliest traumas and also the earliest positive things that happen to us from conception through preverbal development, which is a period of time in psychology where most people can't go. Talk therapy doesn't go there. You know, it can't get back there because, you know, it's nonverbal. So we're back at that period of time. So I actually know a lot about where I come from because I've done a lot of work around it. So I was born in Pittsburgh. My father fought in World War II and had PTSD. He was commander of 5 tanks in Germany. He actually freed a number of the concentration camps and never really recovered from it, to be honest, like so many veterans. The people who really fought in the war struggled in all wars. I have a lot of problem with wars. My own personal experience with my father, thank God I did not go to Vietnam, which would have been the war I would have been involved with. So I grew up with that. I grew up in a very religious town. Based on a mystic named Emanuel Swedenborg. I bet you didn't think you were going to get all this.
No, it's interesting.
And my mother was very much a part of the church and a believer in the church. My grandfather on her side was a deacon, basically, in the church. And it was this weird, strange town in Pennsylvania where literally there were castles on tops of the hills where the rich family lived, the Pitcairns. And we lived down the hill from that. And my family was sort of the intellectual aspects, if you could call it that, of the town. And it was a very interesting religion. I know a lot about it. I have gently and lovingly left it behind. But I came from that and then barely got into college because I didn't understand at that time how you did anything but go to the religious college that was there. Very few of us left. I did leave. I got into Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, which happened to have probably one of the very best theaters in the country showing movies on campus, but it was also connected with the Hartford community. And my senior year, I fell in love with an actress. I knew really nothing about films, had seen 3 films in my life. That had been it. A lot of TV, but not films because of my sort of religious background. And she knew all about movies, and I knew nothing. But I went, that's what I want to do. I want to do that thing on the big screen. And I did it, you know, and the journey was like with everyone who becomes a filmmaker, bizarre and circuitous and whatever it takes to get a movie made. And so that's how I got into movie making. And then just to kind of jump forward into where I am now, I reached a point in my career, I raised a couple of kids. They turned out okay. And actually right now I was just talking with my daughter. She's making this big movie, her second movie that she wrote and directed. And it was just so much fun talking with her about directing. And it's just awesome. I mean, and Jake right now is in Spain making a movie. And I have a young son also who's awesome. And he's 9 years old. So, and in the middle of all that, got into documentaries more and more. And And actually, in the one documentary called In Utero, which was about from conception to birth, the science. That's how I discovered this methodology out of Germany, and then made Uncharitable because Dan Pallotta is a friend of mine from a long, long time ago, and I watched him get destroyed by this sackcloth and ashes ethos that controls the not-for-profit, mission-driven, really most important sector, more important than the private sector, than the for-profit sector or government. There's nothing been really more important. There is nothing more important as far as I'm concerned in terms of sectors. This is the sector of more than 10 million people. I'm going on and on and on here. Stop me, for God's sakes. But
no, this is fascinating.
So it all kind of links together for me. Our sanity, which is teeters on the edge because of the amount of historical trauma, all the wars, and so many misunderstood ideas about the universe, I think, which is pretty big, the universe, kind of figuring it out more and more. I love the James Webb Telescope. I'll go on and on. I mean, I think, but it's all linked in a way to the idea of we really can transform this world. I think it's really possible. I think, I think I'm very excited, and I'm almost 74, and I've been kicked around plenty, and I've had plenty of good luck too, and had awesome times. And I have a sense of hope, even as things look pretty dark. So that's me. That's me.
I mean, when you were first getting into this industry, did you think there was hope? I mean, clearly you did enough that you kept pursuing it, but what were the odds? Were they better back then, or were the odds stacked against you?
I wasn't thinking about hope for the world, for instance. I was just, what I really wanted, I think, first of all, I fell in love with cinema. I mean, I really was, on a mental health level, pretty screwed up. And it only was when I started seeing movies, Fellini, Bergman, Bertolucci, all the greats of the 70s, really, 70s and 80s, that were at this theater, amazing theater. I'll do a shout out to Cine Studio, still going in Hartford, Connecticut. Showed all these movies, and when I went, I want to do that. I was broke. I was living in my bus because my father had gone bankrupt. I had no money, so I was living in my bus, which was kind of cool, and sleeping in a sleeping bag on campus. I was kind of a Looney Tunes guy, but I was struggling in many ways. And when I saw those movies, I went, I'm not crazy. I think I'm not crazy. That's what I want to do. And I loved imagery. I discovered I loved imagery. So I wasn't really interested. I didn't really have a sense of hope. I guess I felt relatively hopeless. I mean, you go back and forth, I feel hopeless. I feel great. I got laid. I'm all, in college. Everything's cool. And then I would get dumped, and I would be in despair, and all those things would go on. And I think I got into movies really because I was so partially, along with just falling in love with the medium, was to become a director. Really, I got so anxious at parties. I just thought, if I were like a director, because I was really like lost in college through a lot of it. And my senior year was when I really discovered movies. And, I made a little movie. I at one point actually hitchhiked down to, I didn't hitchhike, I had my VW bus that I was living in. I hitchhiked a lot. I drove down to Yale and pretend I was a Yale student and used all their editing equipment to cut on there. Just went in, and I just used it. No one stopped me. And when I showed my first film at Cine Studio in Trinity, and the state, and the auditorium was packed, I kind of like went, okay, I won't be anxious at parties, and I can maybe be somebody. Turned out not to be true, but I still was anxious at parties. That never worked. I didn't understand you could make money doing it, or that you could get, famous. I just didn't want to be so anxious. And also, I think the process of making movies, the distraction, the need, the amount of work it took to make movies, kept me relatively sane.
I mean, what's it like to know how successful you've been looking back now that you're in your 70s? You've won multiple, or you've been nominated at least, and won so many awards. You've multiple Director Guild of America awards, multiple Golden Globe awards, multiple Emmys. Like, not many people in the world can say that. How do you feel?
I was having a lot of problems with people who thought I didn't know what I was doing, and why is it taking so long, and why is it costing so much money, and what's going on. And documentaries are strange animals. And we're just it was interesting, and it's certainly not alone in this, that people who have a decent amount of money or have connections to money, and I needed money to make the thing, do believe that they kind of know more than other people. And and I know in the charitable sector, for instance, there's a huge problem with donors demanding that charities run in a certain way, and the movie is very much about and I think the movie really moves towards, give money and let the organizations do with that money as they need to do. These are the people who are experts, and they have, of course, been, the people in the charitable sector are so looked down on in so many ways, and it's outrageous. And the movie is a lot about heroes, about these heroes that really are trying to change the world. And my experience, very similar to theirs, was I've made a ton of movies. I've been very successful. I mean, and you think I don't know what I'm doing? Let me tell you, to them, no one knows what they're doing when they're making. You don't know how to. Releasing a movie is really complicated. Do I have a lot of experience and a lot of expertise? Do I know how to talk to crews? Do I know how to talk to post-production people? Can I, talk circles around most people around the technical aspects of filmmaking? Sure. So why not let me just make the movie the way I want to? But they were scared. People were scared. Now that's changing as the movies come out, and it's having a really kind of triumphant beginning, although huge issues around getting it in theaters, documentaries in theaters. How do we get it really seen by a lot of people? Again, someone said to me, if you've made a movie and you've released it 6 months ago very successfully, you don't know how to release a movie now, because this landscape keeps changing. But you have to be awake and functioning with it, and that's what we're sort of in the middle of. So does it make me feel a whole lot to have won a bunch of awards and made movies that have moved people? And this movie particularly has the response to the movie. We've had 3 premieres, one in New York, one in Chicago, one in LA, has been as good an experience, if not better, than any other movie I've made. I mean, it's a very emotional experience for people. It kind of puts you at neutral. I mean, you kind of are like, I don't know what I'm doing. 74 years old. How long am I going to live? Am I going to see my grandkids go to college? Those are issues that become much more important. An award, you stick them on a shelf. And I remember I did a movie with Jessica Lange years ago. She's won both Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress. And they're stuck up on a shelf on the side, upside down, almost like, it's almost it's an art form to do it. They don't, the Oscars, they don't, none of it. It's really living life. That's the key. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's fun.
That's a great perspective. I mean, yeah, some of that stuff won't last. I mean, once people see Uncharitable, what's one of the lasting things you want them to take away from after they watch it?
I think what I had wanted to do, and I think have succeeded at doing, is to walk into an issue that nobody cares about. I mean, this is the problem. Who wants to see a movie about charity? I mean, shoot me, please. Anything but see a movie, a documentary. I keep calling it a movie because who wants to see? Anyone out there watching this, I said, do you want to see a documentary on charity? No. It's like, yikes. There couldn't be a worse. The charitable people, they're kind of losers. They're corrupt. Whatever. It's all hypocrisy, which is not true at all, by the way. And the movie gets into that. The movie goes very, very deep. And I think what's coming out of this is people have a profound sense of hope, because this sector really is quite spectacular and so attacked, almost because it is spectacular. What is it? Every good deed, no deed goes unpunished. These are people and organizations that are doing really good stuff, and they get punished. And I think what we can do, is really, I think, create a paradigm shift. Meredith Blake is an executive producer on the film, so the main executive producer, and she was an impact producer on An Inconvenient Truth, and has said this is equally as important and mind-changing as An Inconvenient Truth. So I think the sense is it's an emotional movie. Actually, people cry at the end, and they cry with a sense of hope. I mean, we really are going to be able to make it. We're going to make it. I mean, now I'm feeling more and more, and the movie has a huge uphill battle on so many fronts because who wants to see a documentary about charity? It's going to take a while and it's going to sink in, I think, slowly, but it's very exciting and I'm very proud of the movie. And I think that's what comes out of it is people walk out of it being hopeful. Now, the thing is, then you got to build on that because, I've been around enough. I mean, of people feeling something wonderful and then 3 days later it's evaporated. So the key is we're going to be doing much more than just this movie. We're going to be doing more movies. We're going to do a television show and we're going to go back to some big events like, if people haven't seen the movie, they may not know about the AIDS rides, but for instance, they know about Burning Man and maybe Woodstock and we're going to start to have live events again where tens of thousands of people can get together, not just to raise millions of dollars for charities that they believe in, but for transforming their lives, for getting hopeful. I mean, for really being hopeful. That's what the movie's about more than anything else, is going into dark areas and looking at those dark areas. But when you do that, you come out of it and you have I think, a deep sense of hope. I mean, I'm very hopeful.
I love it. I mean, you and Dan have known each other for a long time, but I'm sure over your career, hundreds, if not thousands of people have asked you to make movies with them. I mean, I would just imagine that that's a normal conversation, emails or texts or calls, whatever. How'd you get connected with Dan and why this? I mean,
well, I've known Dan for years and years. I knew him and he's at the top of his game doing the AIDS rides. And he raised, $500 million for AIDS and breast cancer and suicide prevention. And I knew him through all of that, but I was raising 2 kids at the time, so I never did any of the rides. And he and I were good friends and met and talked a lot in various meetings and things like that. And he always dressed really well, And I was kind of like, where do you get your clothes? Like he had these cool belts and these shoes. So I would, he told me, and I would, I was always making not fun of him, but he was like, and I kind of wear like, this kind of stuff. I'm a director. Directors wear clothes. If a director wears a suit, except for David Lynch. David Lynch wears a suit. It's like the weirdest thing because you're on a set. You're wearing jeans and a t-shirt. But David Lynch, I did the last episode of God, why am I suddenly blanking on it? Twin Peaks. Did the last episode of Twin Peaks with David, and it was awesome. But he wore his coat and tie, and I'm like in a t-shirt, And he said to me at one point, I gave him an idea that I thought would help the last episode. He said, "Stephen, I'm really glad you have your thinking cap strapped on properly." I'm going, what? Who talks like that in a suit and tie? I mean, he's a genius. David is a genius. I think some of the best cinema, in fact, is Twin Peaks to this day. I mean, just a sense of hell and heaven, spirituality, materialism, sex, soap opera, violence, and perversion all still remains. People still, I do at least once a couple times a year, people interview me on Twin Peaks. So yeah, I've had an amazing time. I mean, it's the people in it that's great. That's the other thing. Yeah.
I mean, as you're leading this, one of the things we talk about on this podcast is servant leadership, right? And in Hollywood, there's all kinds of different personalities, all kinds of different leadership styles. How do you see servant leadership playing out in Hollywood? Is that even a thing?
Serving, you mean leadership that serves a purpose?
Yeah, or people who lead with a servant mentality, thinking of others first.
It's funny. I grew up in this religious town, like I told you. I left it behind completely. I became a Marxist and a materialist and an atheist and a whatever. And I went to Hollywood, which is like the city of so-called sin, which is sort of like, it's like silly. I mean, I was raising 2 kids. But nonetheless, I left all of that completely behind and just focused on the day to day. So you're never really looking up at the stars and the moon and going, and also you're young and you feel, like, when you get older, you start feeling like, I'm not going to live forever. And I've had a bunch of friends that died. It's like, as you get older, and where are we and what the hell is going on? What's happening here? And you start to get more and more, well, I would say realizing that the universe is vast and realizing that you know nothing really. When you step back, I tell you, awards mean nothing, because you live a life. The world is struggling. There's climate change, whatever. However you want to describe it. It's. I believe strongly in climate change, but there are a number of people who donated to the movie Uncharitable, which was all about donations. I couldn't get anyone to invest in that, and quite a few of them are quite conservative. So I try to be respectful of their positions around all this stuff. Although I believe in climate change, I'm way to the left. I'm very much a progressive, and AOA is my AOC. AOC. What's her?
AOC. Yeah.
Thank you. I've been working. I'm kind of a fan of hers. I just think she's awesome. So that's sort of where I sit. But I have a lot of friends who are conservative, and charity is nonpartisan. That's the thing about it. Unlike An Inconvenient Truth, which with Al Gore, charity is nonpartisan. I think it's critical at this point that we begin to slowly dismantle this partisan toxicity that charity does almost just by definition. You just are charitable, you're kind, So I think servant leadership, I think about how do I think the people who actually do the work are the directors, not all of them, but an awful lot of directors that I know, and producers, are the top producers, the ones who really get stuff done. I'd say 80% of them have been not just humbled by doing the work, but humiliated by doing the work. I mean, I would say this. I would say that the best filmmakers in the world, the very, very best, most brilliant filmmakers in the world, absolutely, are the ones who've never done it. They're the ones who'll tell you what's wrong with your movie. They're the ones who'll tell you if they just had the opportunity, it would be very different. I mean, there's a disparity in this world. There's no question about it. There's very the minorities, and still even women, are unrepresented in this business. And that's something a little bit different. And I want to stay attuned to that. I am a white guy, and I've had a lot of privilege. And I think, nonetheless, if you do the work, if you've done the work, you're either insecure because you don't know what the hell you're doing half the time, and then you can be a bully and try and seem important, or you're not really insecure. You're just being realistic, and you go, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I'm trying to figure this out, And so I think when you get to that place, you can't help but be serving the people around you. So, for instance, if I'm coming to the definition correctly, I would say, what is a director, which is my primary job? In this movie, I was also a producer, which was humiliating, actually, certainly humbling, and I had to do it myself, which is, hopefully we'll never have to do it again. Although I did have final control over everything, which was kind of nice. But actually, a director doesn't do anything except, doesn't shoot the camera. Some people do, but not a lot of them. Doesn't take sound, doesn't act, generally. Just it kind of represents the audience. You sit there and you go, just watch. The watcher, and then you go, and the one thing you do is you go, it's not working. I can feel it's not working. Anyone in the audience watches a movie, goes, that scene's not working. Get me out of this movie. I'm going to walk out of this movie. Terrible reviews. Critics generally know when something's not working. Problem is, if something's not working, what do you say to make it work? What do you say to make it work? And so every single role, you become servant to every department. You're there to serve them, help them be their very best selves. I think it's so critical to, and then take the credit at the end. Then say, I'm the director. And I don't take a film by credit. That's a credit that's been around for a long time. I will never take a film by credit because the film is made by a lot of people. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that at all. So I think it is the best way, the best kind of leadership is to I'm here. What do you need? And I think what you need is to be paid decently. And I haven't always been able to do that in my nonprofit ventures. Been able to do it in making movies generally. And even in this movie, I paid people well. And also because I didn't pay them as well as I could have gotten paid. In many cases, I would say, work for me as long as you can. And when a big job comes along where you make more money, I totally understand if you go take it. But be with me when you can, And that's the way I've made a couple of my movies the last period of time. Because you could get lots of money to make a movie about killing people, but you don't get a lot of money about movies that help people. It's harder.
Gosh, there's so many good nuggets in that. I mean, just thinking through one thing you said, there's so much disparity in this industry as well. What advice would you give to people who are trying to break into the industry? Either actors, producers, directors. What advice would you give to people looking back?
Well, I think the advice I often give is: do you have an iPhone? Yeah, or another kind of phone? Shoot, just shoot. Just if you're an actor, probably, and I think generally, I think there are exceptions to this, but not a lot. Don't write and act. Don't write and direct. Find a writer. Read material. The first movie I made was called Exit 10, and it was based on a Catherine Mansfield short story. And the premise for me was something Alfred Hitchcock had said, which was, the best movies from literature are short stories, and the structure is correct. I think, I actually ended up with the Catherine Mansfield short story. I forget what it was called now. I got a non-exclusive rights, so they could make another movie out of it, which of course no one ever did. But non-exclusive rights, so I got it, and anyone else can do whatever they want with it. I then changed it around, completely rewrote. The script was very different, but the premise remained the same, which was a kind of a surprise, heartbreaking ending. So, and that's what a short film is particularly good for. That film was shortlisted for the Oscars, and that's kind of what got me from New York to Hollywood, and sort of the rest was sort of history, whatever. But history on IMDb maybe. But I think two things. Maybe usually when people are young, their writing is only so good, and it can be very derivative. Find a short story. Find something that's captured you. There's some great writers out there. Look in magazines, look in stuff, look for short stories. There are publications. Read a bunch of short stories. Find one. It could be like a little thing that somebody wrote. And I'd say maybe if you're in college, you look at student stuff, but you don't need to. You can go to like great writers' short stories. No one's going to make a movie out of it other than you. And then get a writer. Maybe you have to write it yourself. I wrote it myself. I'm a passable writer. I wish I'd worked with a writer, a real writer. But, and I think maybe the key is don't underestimate yourself. Even if you fail, do not underestimate yourself. You want to make movies? That's what you want to do? Don't underestimate yourself. I remember there was a class one point, and there was an Asian woman, Asian young woman, who, and there were a bunch of guys there, white guys, rich guys, they were from money, and I was looking at all their films. Her film was light years beyond theirs. Theirs was derivative, and they had all the cameras and everything, and she had nothing. She was light years beyond. And she didn't have the confidence. I mean, there's sort of that culture, the woman, Asian woman, blah, blah, blah. I was just like going, have the confidence. Just do it. Get on take your iPhone and shoot and shoot and shoot and cut and cut and cut. It's like shoot as much as you can for as long as you possibly can, then cut everything out that you can. Don't trust yourself. Maybe get an editor to do it. It's interesting because, and then you create a community of people. And I think that's a big piece of this, is to have a community. I mean, the movie I just finished, you look at the credit sequence. As a director, I've been deeply engaged with 50 people around it. That's awesome. So I think connect with other people, find a great piece of literature, either write the script yourself from that, stay true to that what that story is, get a camera operator, get professional act. I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're in the middle of the country. There's an industrial movie business going for corporations, and they have actors. There's theater department. There's theaters in schools. There are theater, local theaters. Don't underestimate yourself. Go and cast actors. Every single actor, pretty much, except for my kids, except for a couple of people, will shoot a movie. Don't underestimate it, and don't underestimate what you're doing. And if the first movie sucks and you're terrible, don't beat yourself up. That's what it takes. I've made a lot of bad stuff, and also I think equally important, be respectful of everybody you work with. I mean, one of the lucky things I had in my life, really lucky, was I had to earn my way through college. I had to paint houses. I had to, it's like, and I think with my kids who didn't have to do that, they did learn how to work. They really learned how to work. It's like, but sort of taking a moment and looking at the busboy in a restaurant. Busboy, first of all, is a man or a woman, not a boy. And kind of be servant to that person. Tip them well. Look what they're doing. Maybe if you have to do some jobs like that. I mean, I was a handyman later on when Maggie was actually both Maggie and Jake had just been born. I had no money, but I had been a handyman, and I was in Hollywood. I had a fancy house. I had no money. I couldn't get work, and I got to pay for the gas in my car. My wife at the time was doing pretty well, and I went, but I can't live off her. So I was a handyman again. Climb under houses, all this stuff went on. Then I got a movie, and that was done. But be a servant, I think I really like that idea of being, and it's like, there's a phrase, be of service. I realize I don't like that so much. I like do good stuff. Lessen the importance, who am I being of service to? I mean, no, just do good stuff. And one of those things is just be aware that every single person is a human being, and being a bus man or a bus woman in a restaurant is a hard job. Being a plumber who goes under your house where there's spiders, that's a hard job. And be kind and respectful, and it'll be a lot more fun.
For sure.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing now, being able to watch your kids in movies?
Well, right now, my favorite thing is Maggie's now writing and directing. She got nominated for an Oscar for her last script. She's just written one of the best scripts I've read ever. And she's now making that movie, big movie, Warner Brothers. I can't talk about what it's about because it's still hush hush. Talking with her about directing is fabulous. And, talking with Jake about almost anything is fabulous. Well, with Jake just did this movie, The Covenant. Have you seen it? Everyone should see it. It's. I just saw it. It's a great movie. I mean, he really plays a soldier really well. Really physical performance. Really physical, and just a brilliant movie. I cried through half of it, and it's action and all this stuff. It's Guy Ritchie, who's a great director. I mean, a great director, and he's doing another movie with Guy now in Spain. Oh, it's just unbelievable. I mean, I cry through half my kids' movies no matter what. So, it's almost incomprehensible, the life I've gotten to live,
That's so awesome. Okay, before I let you go, I've got 10 extremely quick rapid fire questions, and you just say the first thing that comes to your mind, okay?
Uh-huh.
There's no right or wrong answer with any of these. First question, 5 words that most describe yourself.
Kind of stupid. That's 2 words. Kind of is Kinda. Kind of stupid. Really brilliant. Articulate. How many is that? But sometimes bewildering. I think that's more.
All right. The first person you think of when I said servant leadership.
Can't remember who the person. Now, who comes to mind for me actually is Buckminster Fuller,
Okay.
who said, "Let's have a world that works for everybody with no one left behind." And he was a brilliant guy out of the 60s. And anyone who doesn't know him, look up Bucky Fuller. Brilliant, brilliant. And he was a servant. Actually, yeah, you serve the world. Yeah.
Love it. Favorite author or book?
Oh, I'd say right now it's J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye again, because it speaks to the dilemma of the youth, and speaks to why the title Catcher in the Rye, where it comes from.
Where?
It's the end of the book, and he's a struggling guy. He's a struggling character, and he's cynical, and he's lost, and he's very in very bad shape in the book. It's a great, great book to this day, a great book for young people to read. And the end is, he said, I just want to be the person in the field of rye as the children come through and they're headed for a cliff and they're going to run over the cliff, that I catch them and hold them.
Oh, wow.
And that's what it comes from.
That's good. Okay, this is a good one for you. Favorite movie?
Well, I'd say the favorite movie is the movie that got me into the movie business, which was Fellini's La Strada. A movie really, do you know the movie La Strada? Fellini's La Strada?
Yeah, yeah.
Because at the end of that movie, I was with my girlfriend who introduced me to movies. This wonderful actress, beautiful. Oh my God, she was so beautiful. So what am I doing with this beautiful woman? And I saw at the end of La Strada, I started to cry, and I started to weep, and the movie was over, and everyone left. And later on in that theater, actually, even by then, I was getting to see the movies for free by sweeping the floors and cleaning it up. That's what I did. And I was living in my bus, my VW bus, because I ran out of money, all these weird things. Anyway, I was with her, and I literally could not get out of my seat. I wept for 15 minutes.
Wow.
And she left me 3 days later. But it was like, that's the movie that said, I want to be in the movie business.
All right, favorite food?
God. I, during the pandemic, baked bread. Jake actually got me into baking bread. And I still have the starter, the starter. I think it's sourdough bread to this day, baked by me or Jake or anybody, actually. That's my, and also, and coffee, really good coffee, and garlic and olive oil, but you can't use olive oil to cook, by the way, because it turns rancid. You got to use avocado oil, and I can just keep going until you stop me. Pasta, really good pasta. Pizza when it's really thin crust.
All right, favorite thing to do in your free time?
I have a 9-year-old, and the thing he hates the most is that I now talk with anybody and everybody. Walking down the street, I talk with everybody. It's like the whole world is my oyster. Someone will cut me off in the car. I'm in LA, and I'll be driving my car. I'll wind down the window and I say, and he's knowing when to yell at me. I go, "You remind me of how I drive. You drive just like me." And then we're buddies. It's like people say they're going to shoot you one day, but it's just you just find 15% of the people think you're nuts. 85% of the people are all in the minute you start. That's what I do with my free time.
All right, surprising fact about you.
Jesus. Surprising fact about me. Well, I am a published poet, and sort of chaotic, and a book called Claptrap, and I'm going to probably do another book soon. I'm finishing a memoir about my whole life. But the surprising thing is I am, how would I put it, a really amateur, kind of uninformed scientist.
Love it. All right, favorite place you've been?
Barcelona.
All right, place you want to go that you haven't been?
Asia. I haven't been to Asia.
Okay.
The whole of Asia. All of it.
Love it. Last question. Best advice you've ever gotten?
Recently, by a guy named Jim Hearhurst, I think, in Canada, talking about something that was told to his father. When you listen, you win.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate you, Stephen. Look forward to talking soon.
Awesome. You take care. A pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.